Everybody ready for the jury list? Okay, be seated. Mr. Champagne.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Smith.
Good morning.
You were aware that Dylan Redwine was missing at the time that all this began, correct?
Correct.
All right. And you were aware that law enforcement was going to be conducting a large-scale search on Middle Mountain June of 2013, is that right?
Yes.
And you actually went up to their incident command that was located up at the gravel pit on Middle Mountain, correct?
Correct.
Now, that was before the remains were found.
Yes.
But you had a chance to see the area, take a look at where they'd be searching, et cetera.
Yes, I did.
And after the bones were found, you testified that, from your understanding, law enforcement didn't know if they were human or if they were animal.
That's true.
And they took the bones down to the forensic anthropologist, right?
Correct.
That was Dr. Dawn Mulhern.
Yes.
You were invited to come over for that meeting.
Yes.
And you were actually present when those bones were identified as human.
Yes.
Okay. And you confirmed that by your observations and her words, correct?
Yes.
One of the people that you consult with, you're not yourself a forensic pathologist, right?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No.
Well, one of the people that you consulted with in this case was Dr. Cracium, right?
Yes.
Okay. And he also made the determination that this was a homicide, correct?
Yes.
You said originally that the death certificate or the pending death certificate that you signed was undetermined, correct?
Yes.
Undetermined as to cause and undetermined as to manner, right?
Yes. All right.
Okay. And that you modified that or amended it to change it from undetermined as to cause, but homicide as to manner. Is that correct?
That's correct.
If I showed you a copy of that death certificate, would you recognize it?
Yes.
Okay. May I approach with People's Exhibit number 531?
Yes.
Do you recognize that document?
Yes.
Is that the document, the death certificate for Dylan Redwine?
Yes, it is.
Does that show the manner of death as homicide?
Yes, it does.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of the death certificate currently on file relating to this guy?
Yes.
Move to admit number 531.
Mr. Bogan?
No objection.
It's admitted.
You talked a little bit about cause and manner. You gave this example about a bank robber, right?
Yes.
And how, although the bank robber may not have actually assaulted or hurt that person, that person had a heart attack and died, right?
Yes.
And you called that a homicide because
Yes.
it was caused by the stress or the anxiety of the event.
That's correct.
And so context is important, right? When you're talking about investigating a death, is that right?
Yes.
And the cause and the manner.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did you take into account the context in this case in changing it from undetermined to homicide?
I did.
One moment, please. After the skull was located, you said that you saw it. It was presented to you. Prior to you seeing it, you were aware that they were conducting a search up on Middle Mountain for the skull, correct?
Yes.
Because they had a report from some hikers or something like that there was a skull up on the mountain?
Yes, and they were going to go check it out.
Okay. And had you spoken with Investigator Ezzell about what he should do if, in fact, he found the skull up on the mountainside?
Yes.
And what did you tell him?
That I didn't need to be there. If he thought it was human, then bring it down.
Do you have any concerns about the the actions or the behaviors of law enforcement regarding how they handled the bones of the skull in this case?
Absolutely not.
No further questions.
Mr. Bogan?
You said on cross that you've talked to Dr. Kurtzman about this, correct?
Yes.
And you affirmed on cross-examination that Dr. Kurtzman, using that definition of homicide, determined this is a homicide, correct?
We discussed it, yes.
Right. And what's the date on that final death certificate?
I thought you might need them.
December 27th, 2013.
Say that one more time.
Says
And I'm going to ask you to lean into the microphone.
the date that it was filed.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I'm sorry. February the 18th, 2014.
2014.
Correct.
And when you made those determinations, when you amended that certificate, you weren't relying on what Dr. Kurtzman told you in his official opinion, correct?
I wasn't relying. I guess I'm not sure what you meant.
Were you relying on Dr. Kurtzman's official opinion about homicide in this case when you filed that?
I took that into consideration, yeah.
How did you do that if his report wasn't written until 2018?
His report?
His opinion about homicide wasn't rendered to law enforcement in this case until March 2018.
I'm not sure.
Nothing further.
Any questions from the jury? No? This witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, please.
Mr. Smith? Free to go.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yep.
Cool.
Mr. Bogan?
Mr. Frederick Cracium.
Okay. Mr. Cracium, if you come up to the witness stand up here, please. And if I could have you raise your right hand before you sit down. Yeah, just raise your hand. Sure. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the appellant perjury the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Have a seat. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Cracium.
Oh, good morning.
How you feeling?
A little nervous.
Okay. May I have you please state your full name and spell your last name for the record?
Yes, sir. My name is Freddy Cracium. My father didn't give me a middle name. My last name is spelled C-R-A-C-I-U-M. It stands for Christmas Day. My first name is Freddy. F-R-E-D-D-Y, not I-E.
Okay. What do you do for a living, Mr. Cracium?
I'm a subcontractor. I'm a caretaker. And I do work for my church on a voluntary basis.
And where are you from?
I was born in California, raised in the Bible Belt, and happy to say I've been on this side of the earth for about 25 years. Corners area, excuse me.
Okay. And how do you know Mr. Redwine?
I used to work with him in 2012 when I started in the oil field.
And so you met working the oil fields, was that for United Pipeline?
Yes, sir.
How long did you work together?
On the job that we worked together was approximately 3 months.
And where was that?
I was in San Joaquin Valley, Bakersfield, California, sir.
How long was the project in California?
When I worked on it, it was 3 months, and I think it was going before that, so I really can't tell how long that project was when I worked there.
Did you have an opportunity on that project to spend quality time with Mr. Redwine?
Yes, sir.
And did you have meals together or travel to work sites? Could you let the jury know how it was you came to spend time with him?
Do you want me to explain how all your answers are yes. I did travel with him in the truck. I ate meals with him. I sometimes would learn a lot of things from him. And there was a couple times that he saved my life. So I can say that I know him a little bit. I got to know him on a personal basis, too.
Mr. Cracium, I think you mentioned that this was for United Pipeline. Did United Pipeline have GPS units in the vehicles?
Well, they had more than that. They could also tell you how fast you were driving, where you were going. Yes, sir.
I want to talk to you about the hours you worked and how folks would look when they came off of a job. How would folks look when they got home from projects like this one you did in Bakersfield, California? Section relevance?
I can see some relevance to it. So you can answer the question?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Well, they wouldn't be as snazzy as I am today. When you work in temperature that gets over 100 degrees and you're in the desert and you work sometimes up to 72 hours. For example, the first time I seen Mark, I looked at him like, my God, dude, get a shower. Little did I know a week later I'd be looking at him and feeling the same. You're so tired and you put in so many hours, it's not really looking about putting gel in your head or sometimes even shaving. There's times that I wouldn't even shower. I'm tired.
Mr. Cracium, out in the field, it sounds like you're putting in a lot of hours. Can you tell the jury how many hours you put in a week or when you would get breaks?
Yes, sir. For example, by the time Thursday afternoon at lunchtime came in, it was 40 hours. So we look forward to Friday and Saturday because that's when we put the extra hours in. So. And it was 6 days all the time. We had our Sundays off. And when holidays came, we had time to take off on them too. But I would always remember that didn't wait till Thursday because meantime that is over 40 hours. But it was always like that. Didn't always work all the time on Saturdays. Never on Sundays unless we had to. But we always worked 6 days a week and we worked long hours. Never less than 10. I mean, it was a man's job.
Mr. Cracium, is 40 hours significant because afterwards it would be overtime?
Yes, sir. And we love the overtime.
So does overtime get to be a significant source of income?
Yes, sir. Very much so.
If overtime hours aren't properly counted, would it be a good idea to get into the office once you returned home to make sure memories hadn't faded and you were credited for overtime hours?
Well, yes, sir. If you don't turn in your paperwork and you don't turn in your overtime, or the supervisor forget to do it, you can wait on a couple of weeks before you're going to get paid.
Mr. Cracium, was Mr. Redwine responsible for making sure you and other folks on the crew had those hours turned in? Was that his responsibility?
That was one of the many responsibilities he had, yes, sir.
And I switched gears here a little bit. I want to talk to you about whether you had an opportunity to observe whether Mr. Redwine loved and cared for his child, Dylan. Did you ever have any opportunity to observe that?
Yes, sir, a couple times.
Would you tell the jury about one of those occasions where you saw something that made you think that he had love for his child?
Well, of course, we're talking about spring of 2012, so we're talking a few years ago, but a certain couple things stuck out about me. A lot of times we work long hours, we come right back in the truck. Some of us are repaired, supervisors have his own truck. Remember, we had a good day that day. We worked a long day. And sometimes the supervisor, most of the time, would have to be on the job, but sometimes they could leave early if they had to take care of the animals. And I remember that day that Mark had left early. And We had come home after 12, 13 hours, and all the guys parked in the truck, and he had his own certain parking place where he would park. He'd always back into it. We were supposed to back into parking lots, always for safety. Safety was very important. It was number one thing. But I caught him. I snuck up on him. He was looking down at his phone in his truck. I snuck up on him. I think me and Dee were together. I said, "What's that custard?" Well, we called him Custer because he was the head of the minority Indian group, and he was surrounded by Indians.
Objection, Judge. This is turning into a narrative response.
I think it's okay. He's explaining what happened. It's okay at this point.
Sorry, Mr. Champagne. I'll make it short.
And Mr. Cracium, just make sure you stay close to the microphone, please.
How good would be close? Is this good?
That sounds better.
Okay. I said, "D, I'm going to go check up on Custer. I'm going to see what he's doing." Looking down in his phone, just not moving. Went over there, tapped on him. It spooked him. He had a little bit of red in his eyes. I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Man, I just looked at these pictures." I said, "Well, what are you looking at? He looks like you're crying." He didn't have tears in his eyes. His eyes was red. He was emotional. And he showed me pictures of his son playing baseball, sliding to second base, batting. I think he was going to take off on first base too, but I couldn't get a word in with him. It was like the minute he started talking about it, he's so happy. And he was like it was his pride and joy. And I said, "You know what? I have a son almost that same age, man."
Judge, I'm going to object to hearsay.
Well, this isn't hearsay. It is, but at this point, I think it's a little. I want you to ask some questions.
Sure. Mr. Cracium, what the court, Mr. Champagne, are indicating is that there have to be questions to sort of break up these stories. So I do want to switch gears a little bit, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but we are trying to be considerate about time, too.
Yes, sir.
Fair to say, without going into all of them, that you have other stories about Mr. Redwine and your observations about the way he cared for his child.
Yes, sir, towards my wife and towards my daughter.
Switching gears here, were there occasions when Mr. Redwine, well, you've described, I think, in an answer to another question that he was your supervisor, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Did you have opportunity to observe him being forgetful as he was your supervisor?
A couple times, yes.
Objection, relevant.
Well, then maybe I don't understand the relevance to that.
I want to approach, if we're going to have any further discussion about that. That's as much as I needed to ask on that issue.
Okay, go ahead. Proceed.
And your answer was a laughing yes, that you had observed that?
Yes, sir, I could tell you why on one occasion.
I think the judge requiring we move on from that. Yes, sir. In the winter of 2012, early 2013, did you run into Mr. Redwine?
Yes, towards after Thanksgiving, I think it was. Yes, sir.
Can you describe what his demeanor was, and with peace and respect, briefly?
I don't mean to laugh at this because this is when I seen Mark after Dylan was missing. I seen a man that I didn't know anymore. He didn't look the same. He didn't talk the same. He was totally lifeless, and he was scared.
Mr. Cracium, did he give you flyers?
Yes, sir.
Did you affix those to your vehicle?
Yes, sir. I put 2 of them on, and I passed out a few more. They were pictures of Dylan.
Did he talk to you about searches he'd been a part of?
Yes, sir.
After that encounter with Mr. Redwine, did you lose touch?
I'm sorry?
Did you lose touch with Mr. Redwine after that encounter?
Yes, sir. We were going to try and get together, but I never got in touch with him again.
And were you worried about him?
Very much so, sir. Gravely.
So kind of a dramatic shift here onto another subject, but was there any occasion where you had been discussing with Mr. Redwine buying his truck?
Irrelevant. Well, it may be relevant. See what the relevance is. At this point, it's not hearsay. It's just that we talk about buying a truck. That's not hearsay. Go ahead.
Did you, sir?
More than just that, sir.
Were you also going to rent his house in Vallecito?
Yes, sir, I was planning to.
And why did you ultimately decide that you didn't want to do that?
Well, the first thing was I had to make enough money, but the second thing is after what he told me I didn't want to go there.
Okay, and that I'm gonna. I don't see what's relevant.
Do you want me to reapproach?
Okay.
Sir, you said that.
Wait. Pardon. Okay.
Sir, you said you were scared to move to the house in Vallecito?
Yes, sir.
Tell the jury why.
After what me and Mark had talked about when I seen him.
And what were you scared of if you were living in that residence?
Well, the things that we discussed and the way that he looked when we talked about him.
So vandalism and otherwise occurring at the house?
More than just that, sir.
That's it for this final question.
Understood. Mr. Cracium, that's all I have. I think Mr. Champagne will have some questions for you.
Mr. Champagne?
Thank you.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm good, sir. Thank you. How are you, Mr. Champagne?
I'm well.
I'm sorry I couldn't talk to you the night when you called me, but
I appreciate that. Unusual here in the courtroom is that we're not allowed to chat. But we did talk on the phone the other night. Is that right?
yes, sir.
And you said that you preferred to just talk here in court.
Yes, sir. I thought it would be better if the jury had to hear what me and you would talk about instead of just me and you.
Sure,
I think it would be fair that way. Also with the officer.
And
I
so,
think it's fair to them. They get to hear what we talk about.
sure, I understand that. So you said that Mark Redwine was your supervisor?
Yes, sir. He's also my friend after that.
Okay. He actually gave you a big promotion, right?
Yes, sir. So to speak, yes, sir. I earned that. He didn't give it to me. I earned it.
Fair enough, but you appreciated it.
Well, I hope everybody does when they get a promotion. Yes, sir.
Okay, good. And actually, you gave him, no, strike that. You don't really, I mean, you worked with him for about 3 months, right?
Almost every day, sir, except one of the whole.
Every day. But you never saw him bring Dylan Redwine out to California, did you?
No, sir.
Right. And you never visited the house up in Vallecito while Dylan Redwine was there, did you?
You scared? No.
Yeah. And you've never even met Dylan.
No, but I've seen plenty of pictures about him. I know about him.
Right. But it's a simple question. You never met the child.
Never got to, but I wanted to.
You never saw Mark Redwine and Dylan Redwine interact.
No, sir.
You really, other than what Mark has told you, you really don't know anything about their relationship. Isn't that right?
Well, not just what he told me.
Other than what you saw and what he told you, you don't know anything. You never saw them interact.
That's right. I never seen them together.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Any questions from the jury? Can he be excused?
Yes, thank you.
No objection.
Mr. Cracium, you're free to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next witness?
Your Honor, the defense would call Investigator Gabbard. I may need a second to adjust here. No, I'm good.
Well, back up, Investigator Gabbard. It's been a couple weeks, so I'm going to swear you in again. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Speak up.
In the interest of time and based on the previous record made, I'd request to inquire with leading questions.
You may.
Welcome back. Sir, would you please state your full name and spell your last name for the record?
Joseph Patrick Gabbard, last Gabbard.
I want to talk to you about something that was occurring in the spring of 2013 where you followed Mr. Redwine to New Mexico so his truck could be seized. Do you recall that?
Vaguely.
It was yourself and members of the La Plata County Sheriff's Office and the San Juan, New Mexico County Sheriff's Office. You were watching Mr. Redwine travel?
Yes, we will.
And when you seized the truck, you helped Investigator Cowling remove the battery from it. Do you recall that?
Yes, after that was back here.
As you were removing it, the two of you took note of the fact that it was dirty and corroded?
Correct.
Both you and Cowling remembered that Mr. Redwine had mentioned replacing a battery, right?
Correct.
There was some suspicion that, given the state of that battery, that perhaps something he said to you was inaccurate.
I'm sorry, could you?
That battery was so corroded that your perception was, well, he couldn't have switched the battery looking at what you saw.
Correct.
But then ultimately, as you looked into it further and went and reviewed a recording, you determined that Mark had, in fact, given you accurate information. He replaced the battery in the ATV.
That is correct.
And that was spring 2013?
I believe so, yes.
Do you recall on that occasion that Cowling mentioned to Mr. Redwine that Mr. Redwine could, quote, hang with you guys on searches if you wanted?
I don't recall without looking at my reports.
Or I can pull that up for you.
Yes.
Well, it's buried deeper than I should take any time to that point to find. Do you recall anything along those lines, though, that the searches were being discussed and Mr. Redwine said that he wanted to come out?
Which searches are you talking about?
This would have been spring 2013.
Are you talking about a search for the remains? Are you talking about a search of his house? Just what kind of search?
I see. My impression based on that report was that you were talking about searches in the area.
It could have been.
Just a moment. It's page 4,654, so it's going to take a second to pull it up. So I'll circle back on this. What was the page count? I'm sorry. 4,654. There's also another one from 10,946. Approach. You may. So I'm going to bring you a transcript. You're not speaking on the page where Mr. Redwine makes the remarks and he's inquiring after, but I want to bring you the first page so you can see that you were here for that interview according to at least the transcriber, and that you're on some of these pages, but at this point in the conversation, Mr. Redwine's addressing Tom County.
Judge, I guess I'm confused as to the procedure. I get that he's trying to refresh recollection here, but I think it's about a hearsay statement of the defendant. I don't think that's admissible.
I don't think that was the question. Isn't this the question about you can come hang with us and you didn't remember during the search?
That will be the question when I get page 4,654.
What is the question now?
The question now is, do you remember Mr. Redwine reiterating that he wanted to be involved?
I'm going to sustain the objection.
So this would be offered not for the truth of the matter, for the effect on listener and to, well.
No, it's not. I've made my ruling.
Was there another part of the discussion where Mr. Redwine?
Objection, Your Honor.
Well, maybe.
Okay, I mean, the thing is, the way he's asking the question, he's
I
trying.
understand, and you need to get up. I understand.
Right, and so he's trying to insert and testify in front of the jury about what Mr. Redwine said in the form of the question, which is totally improper.
And you shouldn't be doing that. I mean, and right now it sounds like it's going to be a hearsay response.
It would. And may we approach? I would not like to do this.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
Do you recall Mr. Redwine informing you in April of 2013 he did not see a point in going through the lake again?
Could you repeat that?
Sure. This is respecting searches and how they're being conducted. Do you recall that Mr. Redwine was telling you he did not necessarily see a point in going through the lake again?
I don't recall.
Would it refresh your recollection to take a look at it for
Yes.
transcripts?
It's the 10,946 page.
This is 4,654, and to get the context for it, you should start at line 23 and read through 37. Commissioner Approach.
Yes. Okay.
That's sufficient time to refresh your recollection, sir?
Yes.
May I approach?
Yes.
So what Mr. Redwine was saying, or is your memory refreshed on him saying that he did not necessarily see a point in going through the lake again?
Yes. And were you along on that ride up Middle Mountain towards Bear Creek Trailhead, Bear Eye Park, and then later on to Runlet? With?
I beg your pardon, thank you. It was in June 2013. It would have been Mr. Redwine, Investigator Goldbright, Investigator Cowan.
I don't recall that one. If I give you a date, maybe this will reorient you. June 29th, 2013, Investigator Tom Cowan, Investigator Joe Gabbard, and Mark Redwine. Investigator Goldbright would not have been along. That one I remember.
And that was the day that, did you guys go to a location you're calling Lunch Rock?
I don't recall Lunch Rock.
Okay. But at a minimum, on the day that you were in the vehicle with Mr. Redwine, that you passed a location that was referred to by Sheriff's Office, at least, as the gravel pit.
Yes.
Mr. Redwine was inquiring whether remains had been found near there. Do you recall that?
Can we approach, Judge?
Yes. Go ahead, Mr. Moran.
Sir, I've been directed to move on, and it's probably a good idea, in part because you couldn't hear in the back.
You can just move on, okay?
May I inquire after the noise in the car?
Why? You're moving on. We're not even going to get into it.
Understood. Sir, you responded to reports of vandalism reported at Mr. Redwine's house. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Mr. Redwine mentioned concern that people wanted to eliminate him.
We keep having the same problem, Judge. This is the problem.
No, I'm gonna sustain that, Mr. Moran. You've got the vandalism in. You've already got the issue. You've already been in front of the jury, the issue with the two other ladies. Just that's your side.
Understood. With that, then, Your Honor, I will cede to the prosecution. Investigator Gabbard, I believe the prosecution will have some questions for you. Thank you, sir.
No questions, Your Honor.
Okay. Any questions from the jury? No? Can Mr. Gabbard be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next defense witness.
Your Honor, would the defense would call Lieutenant Ezzell.
Okay, come on up, Lieutenant Ezzell. And I'll swear you in again also. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Have a seat.
Good morning, Lieutenant.
Good morning.
We meet again. Would you spell your last name State your full name for the record.
Jim Ezzell. Last name is Ezzell.
Permission to approach?
Yes.
Sir, are you familiar with the item that I just provided to you?
Yes.
And was what is contained in that bag something that you sent off to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation?
Pursuant to a request, yes.
And the request that you made of CBI pursuant to the request that you got was that the contents of that bag be tested for DNA, right?
Correct.
Are you able to discuss, or can you tell the jury how what's written on that bag gets written on the bag?
In part, yes.
Starting with the top line, where you describe to the jury what's written on there?
In the blank titled agency, the letters LPCSO are written.
So what does that mean?
La Plata County Sheriff's Office.
Is there a GPS coordinate location on there?
There is.
Will you please read that into the record?
North 3728.798. Excuse me. West 107.31.876.
Are the things that are written on that bag, and does that bag then essentially become a document that is prepared in the ordinary scope of things the sheriff's office does?
Essentially, yes.
Where is this bag with the writing on it get stored after it is prepared?
This bag gets stored once it's been sealed, yes.
Is it stored in a place that only the evidence technician is supposed to have access to it?
That is correct.
And when that bag is removed from that location, it's supposed to be recorded, is that right?
Yes.
With respect to this particular item, were those procedures followed?
I would assume so, but that's not clear on this bag itself.
Is there another location or another place where data is stored, where that information would be contained that you're familiar with?
Yes, either in reports and or an evidence log.
And as the lieutenant in charge of the investigation and advisory witness in this case, are you familiar with that document?
Familiar with both reports and evidence log, yes.
And with respect to those reports and the property evidence log documents, are they roughly accurate?
I would hope so.
Is it a regular part of La Plata County Sheriff's Office work to keep and maintain records like what's recorded on that bag?
Yes.
And what's recorded on that bag is supposed to be truthful, is that right?
Correct.
Your Honor, at this time, we're going to move to admit this bag and its contents.
Did you forget to do something? Isn't it supposed to be marked? Do we have a number? Wasn't it supposed to be marked before you brought it up?
I am concerned about putting anything on that bag.
There's a way to put things on the bag. What would this number be?
You know, Judge, if it's easier, we can just call it a people's exhibit.
I don't care. Do you want to mark it for me?
People's 527.
Okay. And, well, 527 is admitted.
With that, I don't have any further questions.
Well, can we find out what it is?
It's all on the back.
Well, I don't know what it is. The jury doesn't know what it is.
I'll address it, Judge.
All right, thank you.
Is that the beer can, sir?
Yes, it's a beer can.
Let's talk about that beer can. So Investigator Patterson, when he was out on the initial search, he gave the same GPS to a central location and went on numerous items, correct?
That's correct.
And then he also...
Objection, hearsay.
I think it's been testified to before, but it is hearsay. So I sustain that objection.
Are there numerous items from the same search that are marked with the same GPS coordinates?
Yes,
And there's also an admitted exhibit by Investigator Patterson that actually maps out the real locations of all those items, right?
correct.
Let's talk about packaging. Is there pen writing on that packaging?
Yes, there is.
And is there marker writing on that packaging?
Yes.
Is the pen writing the handwriting of Tanya Goldbright?
Yes, it is.
Was she one of the investigators that was there when that item was collected?
Yes.
Then after that item was collected, was something called the field log created?
Yes.
Was the field log the real-time information that went into the log sheet of where the items are located?
Yes.
Does that field log say 50 yards north, consistent with Goldbright's writing on that packaging?
Yes.
What exactly does Goldbright's writing say on that packaging?
50 yards north.
I'm going to object to it being characterized as Goldbright. That's an out-of-court statement for the truth of where it was located.
No. That's two different objections, number one. You're objecting on the authentication as to whether or not he knows her writing, which hasn't been testified to, but it's already gone by you, so I'm going to let that continue. They work in the same unit. I think you can get to them. I'm not going to waste your time. And the second one is you're objecting to hearsay on something that you just are you reading off this exhibit, Mr. Ezzell?
Yes, I am.
Okay, which is going to be in front of the jury anyway. It is the evidence. So go ahead.
Thank you, Judge. So there's handwriting on there in pen that you stated you recognize as Investigator Goldbright's. What does it say?
It says 50 yards north of shoe location.
Okay. And now Mr. Moran referenced an evidence log, right?
Yes.
You referenced a training log that was created prior to that evidence log, correct?
I'm sorry.
You talked about a training log that's created prior to the evidence log, correct? I'm sorry, field log, is that the term?
Yes, field evidence log.
Okay, so procedurally speaking, when someone bags an item, they write a description on it, and then they call into the field log so that information can be recorded.
Correct.
You've viewed that field log yourself.
I have.
That field log's in discovery, and defense counsel has it.
Yes.
What does the field log describe the location of the item as?
Objection, hearsay.
Mr. Johnson?
So, Judge, counsel suggested the evidence log has hearsay on it that he spoke about. What I'm clarifying is the accuracy of the information on the packaging. I'm not concerned with the truth of the matter asserted, but counsel brought this whole line of questioning up and cited a similar document. I'm clarifying where everything went informationally on the packaging and when.
You can ask him if the two are consistent.
I'm sorry?
You can ask him if the two are consistent with
Okay.
the packaging.
Thank you. Is the writing from Tanya Goldbright, who we know from testimonies out in the field that day, consistent with the information on the field log?
Yes.
Does that GPS coordinate appear on the field log?
It does.
Does it appear on the evidence log?
Yes.
So, do you have a copy of the field log? May I approach, Your Honor?
You may. You want to show it to counsel, though?
Yes, it's 12051, in discovery. It's a double-sided, it didn't print really well. I'm just going to do page 1 if that's all right.
I'm going to want to take a look at that, please.
Let's see the printing. I'm going to mark it as 528, Judge.
All right.
And then I'll show it to counsel. I both showed it to counsel and explained it to counsel. May I, please?
You may.
Investigator Ezzell, have you seen 528 before?
Yes.
Is that the field log?
Yes, this is the field log.
Now, pursuant to your normal procedures, when someone finds something in the field, then they're calling in, and the first thing they're doing is calling in for the field log, right?
Correct.
Does that field log list any GPS for the shoe?
It does not.
Is the GPS location for the shoe consistent with People's 527?
Pardon me.
What's your objection?
Hearsay. The levels of hearsay necessary, and if this is anything similar to a business record, that foundation's got to be laid, but who's communicating to who's typing it into that report, the admission
as of now, I'm going to sustain the hearsay objection.
Are field logs regularly kept in the ordinary course of business at the sheriff's office when items are found in the field?
Yes.
And are they made at or about the time that the information is collected?
Yes.
And is that a fair and accurate copy of the field log from the Middle Mountain search that involved the beer can that's People's 527?
Yes, it is.
Judge, at this time, pursuant to 8036 of the Colorado Rules of Evidence, I would move to admit People's Exhibit 528 into evidence as a business record.
I'm going to ask the voir dire.
All right, you may.
Who made the call that was recorded on that document?
It would have either been Tanya Galbraith or Dan Patterson.
So you don't know.
They were the two on site when this item was found.
You would agree that there were several other people on site that day as well, correct?
These were the two investigators that would have contacted the command post.
But you would agree that there was, we heard from a sheriff's office employee named Brenner. He was up there. Is that right?
It's no relevance for a business record.
I'm not sure what the relevance is either.
So you don't know who made the calls, but you believe it may have been one of two people. Who did they make the call to?
The investigators were assigned to make the calls to the command post.
Who did they call to?
To the individual manning the command post, I believe that would have been Deputy Aaron O'Neill.
But you're not sure about that either.
I'm sure that she was in the command post.
But you're not sure that she's the one who took the call.
Why is that relevant for this?
Because the foundation for this is how it was made. And a business record's got to be made in so substantially the same way that it's the same every single time. And what we're hearing is that it's not occurring in that way.
That's not what we're hearing. Do you have any other questions?
Yes.
Then ask them.
Where was this document kept?
This document was kept in the command post.
Why was it not available when that bag was written on?
It was available by communication with the command post. The bags were in the field. The log was at the command post.
When was the bag written on with GPS coordinates?
I can't tell you exactly when that was written on there.
Fair to say that the standard operating procedure would be to write it when you are at the location.
What's that got to do with the field log?
I'll save it for cross.
Thank you. I'm going to admit the exhibit. I'm going to find that the Lieutenant Ezzell is a person of knowledge about the field log, which was from previous question before this tried to come in. And other than that, Mr. Johnson made the appropriate foundation under 803.6.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Lieutenant Ezzell, the field log comes before the evidence log, right?
Correct.
And you know from the reports in this case that the location written on the bag was primarily written that you had already described to the jury, right?
Yes.
Then at some point, does somebody write more on the bag and seal it and then log it into evidence?
Yes.
And is that when the evidence log is created?
Yes.
Now, if you look at the item that the description of the beer can, that description does not have a GPS coordinate associated with it in the field log, does it?
It does not.
And it does not have a GPS location associated with it in Ms. Goldbright's handwriting?
Correct.
Are there several items next to it that actually have the very same GPS location?
Yes.
And is that then the GPS location that's written on the bag later on at the time that it's logged into property and evidence?
It is.
And then that would have gone into the evidence log?
Correct.
So in terms of the mystery of the beer can's location, the most accurate real-time information is right on that field log?
Yes.
Judge, at this time I have a couple other topics I'd like to cover with Lieutenant Ezzell rather than recalling him later. Thank you, Your Honor.
We would object to that procedure. I want to clear up this issue.
You agreed to it in chambers.
I object.
Mr. Bogan, are you withdrawing that agreement? You guys want to come up, please? So you can call him on rebuttal if you want to, Mr. Johnson. For this.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Oh, and I'm sorry, Aaron, I'm the one supposed to be watching this. Okay. You done? Redirect?
Thank you, Your Honor.
I'm assuming you're done. You sat down.
Yes, Your Honor. Based on.
Well, you can call him back.
Thank you.
Commissioner approach.
Yes.
Permission to approach.
Yes.
Approaching with Defendant Exhibit 1922. Yeah, just 1922.
Much happy.
Lieutenant Ezzell, what's Defendant Exhibit 1922, if you know?
This is an evidence log.
What's the title at the top of this document?
The Plata County Sheriff's Department's evidence log.
What is an evidence log?
It's the log that is filled out when items are submitted into evidence.
Does it have somebody's signature on it?
Has Carol Mashner's signature on the bottom.
May I approach?
Yes.
I'll stipulate to admission if counsel wants to make it faster.
You want 1922 in? Please. It's admitted.
People's Exhibit 528. No signature on it, right?
Are you referring to the document that you just took?
Yes, sir.
I don't recall seeing a signature on it.
If you want to double check, I can bring it back up.
I don't recall seeing a signature on it. You can bring it to me if you'd like.
On Defendant's Exhibit 1922, there's an item 213. Do you see that, sir?
Yes.
And that's the banana peel, is that right?
Yes.
And you see that there was a spot on that line where the GPS coordinate location was scratched out.
Objection beyond the scope.
It is beyond the scope as far as I can tell.
This is absolutely within the scope of accurate record keeping.
It's already been admitted. And why would this have anything to do with accurate record keeping? That's something, it's on the exhibit itself.
Sure.
And I think the jury can look at it, and I think we can argue it.
Sir, would you agree that there are bone fragments listed on this document?
Yes, there are.
And those were bone fragments associated with the death of Dylan Redwine.
This is beyond the scope, Judge.
And why is this within the scope?
Demonstrating that this was of critical importance and the information was recorded accurately.
It's a standard.
On this,
I mean,
I'll limit it strictly to the beer can. Line 215 is the Miller Lite beer can, is that right?
That's correct.
And it has the individual's name on it that found it, is that right?
Patterson, yes.
And there is a GPS location listed after Patterson's name, is that right?
Yes.
And it's the exact same GPS location that you read into the record a moment ago?
Yes.
And it's important in an investigation to identify where things are located. Agreed?
Objection. This has all been covered, and it's cumulative, argumentative.
I think that's a pretty obvious question, and I agree that it's cumulative and argumentative.
I thought so too. I'll leave it at that. Hold on a second. One final question on the locations here. There is no GPS location associated with the black Jordan tennis shoe, correct? Permission to approach. I can refresh your recollection. I see you looking. It's item 194.
If he doesn't have it, yeah. And then are you done? Because I want the exhibit back that you're holding. I don't want to lose it. Is it the same? Okay. If it's the same, then that's fine. We don't have a problem with it.
.194 is the black Jordan tennis shoe, correct?
Correct.
And there's no GPS coordinate listed with that shoe, is that right?
Not on this document.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Any questions from the jury? Okay, you can step down. Next witness?
Grady King.
Coming up, Mr. King.
Did we have 1 moment to coordinate
Yeah,
an
that's
exhibit?
fine.